Hello and welcome or welcome back. My name's Emily and today we're going to talk about books. Specifically, we're going to go through the 5 books that I read in January and just chat a little bit about each one. The first book that I read in January was a reread of something that I read in 2021 and really loved that year, and I actually read this with a book club, and this was The Vanishing Half by Bennett. This story is about 2 twin sisters who grow up in the same town and then end up running away, and then their lives kind of separate and we follow both of their life paths. One sister lives in the same town that she grew up in with her black daughter, and then the other sister is passing as white and is kind of living this double life sort of thing, and we follow their families through multiple generations and get to really dive into the characters. This was a very character heavy book, I would say, and not as plot heavy, which is the type of book that I really love. I love like a deep dive into characters, and when the author does a great job deep diving into different characters and following them through multiple generations, honestly, I don't need that much of a plot. I do usually find myself not enjoying a book the second time around if I read a book. Like every time I reread a book, I feel like the second time around, naturally, I'm just a little bit more critical of the writing in the book because I already know the story. So this book was no different. I definitely found things that I didn't love in it that I didn't necessarily notice as much the first time going through. But overall, it's still a book that I would definitely recommend, especially if you love character heavy books. It's the type of book that just makes you so empathetic towards other people, and that you get to see like how they grew up and why they make the decisions that they make, and kind of like just dive really deep into like, why did they do this? Why did she do that? Do we feel that this is justified? It was a great book for a book club. I feel like the discussions were interesting. It's an interesting subject. And this was just like a really heartbreaking book, especially with the decisions that some of the characters made. I feel like you're just kind of like, oh, why are you doing that? It tugs at the heartstrings, you know? Pretty similar vibe to Hello Beautiful, but Hello Beautiful didn't really deal with issues of race. So this book was definitely very eye-opening to the things that people go through, especially being set in like the 1950s. I feel like I may have preferred this book in first person instead of third person, just because I wanted to be more in the character's shoes instead of feeling like an outsider. And then I also feel like the pacing was a little bit off in this book, and there were times where it would kind of start to get into something that I was really interested in, and then the chapter would end pretty abruptly and we would skip forward a few years in time, and there were just some moments that I wish were explored a little bit more instead of just skipping past. The book did feel really intentionally written though, so I'm sure that there are reasons for skipping around and a certain feeling that the author wanted to invoke, but I think that I just may have enjoyed it more if we got to more deeply explore some of the issues that were mentioned, and if we got maybe even just a couple of the chapters from that first person point of view. Like if we had followed maybe one of the characters from first person and the rest from third, I don't know, maybe it was just meant to give us like that true understanding of everyone from the same view instead of just seeing one character's perspective. It was a much faster read than I anticipated. Both times I read it, I got through it really fast. So definitely would recommend this if you love multi-generational stories about people, just like very character heavy books. The next book that I read in January was the final book in the Caraval series, which was Finale by Garber. I talked about the first 2 books in this trilogy in a couple of other videos, but finally got around to reading the third, and I really enjoyed this. This is a young adult fantasy series about a carnival circus type of vibe, the first 2, and then the third one had the same characters but was set in a different place and had a different plot, so it wasn't just another caravel that was happening. And we got to see, the first book was from the older sister's point of view, the second was from the younger's, and then this was from both of their points of view. So this felt like the perfect end to that series. We didn't follow this through the game of Caraval. In this book, we followed the 2 sisters as they were trying to... It's really hard to talk about the third book in a series without giving spoilers for the series, but we basically follow the fates that were stuck inside a deck of cards in the first couple of books in the series. So it was just kind of a different like a step away from the first two books, and it just felt like a really good conclusion. Some of the things that I loved about this book were that the ending of it felt like it really fit with the series and what I would expect for all the characters. And then I also really loved the vivid visuals that we got when describing the very fairy tale-like elements of this book, like the sisters' dresses and the town that they were exploring and going through just all felt very dreamy, and that's what I loved about this series so much. I really loved the sister dynamic and the brothers dynamic that was present in this book. And then I also really loved the character development. I felt like some really great choices were made. Some things that I would change about this book, or that I feel like just I didn't love, were that some of the characters' actions felt out of character. Just a couple of times I was like, that just doesn't seem right, but it is a fairy tale, it's a young adult book, so it was like not super realistic, and I understand that. That was kind of like how it was meant to be. And then I also wish that there was a little bit more consent in some of the scenes. I just felt like there were some questionable moments where like one of the main characters didn't want to be kissed and she was kissed. And since this is for a young adult audience, I wish that clear consent had been given, because I feel like that's something that is important for young people to learn about. And it wasn't anything crazy that I feel like was super problematic, but it just would have been good to have it in there, you know? The third book that I read was Bunny by Mona Awad, and I freaking loved this book, and I made a whole video about it because I had so much fun reading and theorizing about what happened, but there were some things that I didn't like about it, and I actually didn't really like it when I first started reading it. Like, I was halfway through this book thinking like, do I want to finish this? Am I gonna rate this 1 or 2 stars? I'm not loving it. And then a switch flipped inside of me, and I ended up loving the second half of it enough that it, you know, it had a redemption arc with me. I can totally understand why people don't like this book, especially because in the first half, Samantha is just absolutely maddening. The writing style is tough to get through at the beginning. The grammar was not great, but it felt very purposeful once I got to the end and was like, seeing it juxtaposed with a better writing style, it was like, okay, I kind of see why that was the way that it was, but I hated it at first. So I'm glad that I stuck with it. I'm glad that I finished it, but can totally, absolutely see why someone would not like this book. The subject matter was so interesting. This was such a creative book, and I haven't really read anything like it, and I love that, you know? Reading this book, the best way to describe it is that reading this book felt like watching a horror movie that's like kind of trippy and nonsensical and doesn't really get resolved at the end. A vibe. The next book that I read on Kindle, so I don't have a physical copy, and it was Butcher and Blackbird by Brynne Weaver. I've seen so many great reviews of that book and heard so many people talk about it so highly, and ultimately, I was not a huge fan. I didn't hate it, but I also didn't love it. I feel like I was not in the right headspace to read it or something. Like, I just didn't find it as funny as some of the people in my book club found it. But then as I was hearing them talk about it and talking about the moments that they found really funny, I was like, okay, I can kind of see like why people love this book. So it's another one of those where I'm like, it wasn't for me, but I can definitely see why people love it. And I didn't think it was poorly written. It was really well paced, and I feel like I was very interested to keep reading it and never wanted to put it down because I was curious about what happened next. The thing that I really didn't love about it was it's this story about 2 serial killers that fall in love, and it's like a romance, a rom-com, if you will, between these 2 serial killers. And I feel like it just had the humorous, light tone of a rom-com juxtaposed with serial killers, and they were serial killers that killed serial killers, so they were like vigilantes. But the humorous, light, witty tone of a rom-com to me just didn't go super well with 2 serial killers. It could have been just that I hadn't read anything like it. I think I would give the other 2 books in the series a try because it was a fun read that was well paced, a page turner, if you will, where you want to just keep reading and knowing what happens next, but it just didn't necessarily hit the way that I feel like it hit for other people. But if you love that book, I love it for you, and I feel like if you like romantic comedies and dark books, you would like this book. I think because I'm not a huge romance girly, I couldn't appreciate it for what it was, but I want to become a romance girly, so catch me reading the next two in the series probably. If you've read The Butcher and Blackbird and the other two in the series, please let me know what you thought of them. Let me know if it's worth continuing, because I could be convinced pretty easily to continue it, even though I didn't love it. Does that make any sense? The last book that I read in January, I actually listened to, and oh my gosh, this might be my favorite audiobook. The book was Tom Lake by Ann Patchett, and it was performed by Meryl Streep, who is just such an icon of a woman and an actor. And she did an incredible job reading the book. More actors and actresses need to read audiobooks because it was a performance and it was incredible. The book follows this very wholesome family that is back on their farm for COVID, and it's told through the point of view of the mom, and she's telling her daughters who are in their 20s this story of her being an actress for a brief time when she was younger, and so she's like reliving her days as an actress, dating someone that would later become a movie star, and it's just told through this perspective that is so calm and wholesome, and it was honestly just like an amazing book to listen to, because we follow and see like the drama of this, like the sisters and the mom, and we just see life through a very mature, wise perspective of the mom. And Meryl Streep reading something like that is just like, oh my gosh, it was amazing. If you need an audiobook, especially because you know Spotify has their audiobooks, Spotify, if you want to sponsor me, like I will gas you up. Like if you need an audiobook, Tom Lake is the audiobook to read, because oh my gosh, it was quite a performance. I think I would have loved reading the actual book as well, because it was really well written, like just a beautiful storyline. It wasn't as sad as those types of books tend to be. So if you need something that's like heartwarming but not absolutely devastating, I would definitely recommend it. I am looking at my notes for Tom Lake right now, and I don't have that many notes over my January reads, but for Tom Lake, I wrote down, if Daisy Jones and the Six and Hello Beautiful had a baby. Straight vibes in all caps. So if you loved Daisy Jones and the Six and Hello Beautiful, you will love this book. And I think that honestly, like if you're not an audiobook person, or if you're not a fiction audiobook person, which is kind of how I am, this one did not miss. It hit. It was amazing. And I can't say enough good things about Tom Lake, specifically the audiobook. I have no negative things to say about Tom Lake, and that's where I'll leave my review. I think that about covers my January books, and I'm so excited for the books that I'm reading right now. I am listening to the audiobook for Tomorrow, and then I'm reading The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. So those are great so far, both really solid books. And I'm also feeling so grateful and happy because I woke up, I think yesterday, to 200 subscribers. So if you've subscribed to my channel, thank you so much. For people that have been like leaving comments and chatting with me about books and the books that they recommend, especially on my latest video going through all the books on my physical TBR, thank you so much. It's been like amazing just to hear people's recommendations and have people engaging with me and the videos that I put out. It's just so truly like so fun, and I really appreciate it. So like and subscribe if you want to see more, and let me know if there's any of the books that I read in January that you'd want to hear like a more in-depth review about, because I would love to make something longer about like any one of these specific books. So if there's anything you'd be interested in, just let me know. I'm kind of going back and forth between the idea of like making shorter videos versus making longer videos. I love listening to people's like monthly reading wrap-ups because I feel like it's just great to get like quick notes on a book, especially without being spoiled. But then once I read a book, I always feel like I want to go to YouTube and hear like a 20 to 30 minute video with going through someone else's opinions about that book. So let me know what you want to see and I'll provide the content. Again, I appreciate all the support so much. Thank you. I hope that you have a lovely, lovely day, week, weekend, and I hope that Taylor Swift's boyfriend's team wins the Super Bowl, because right now it's Sunday morning and they have not played yet. Thank you so much again, and have a lovely day. Bye. I feel like I may have preferred this book in, oh my gosh,